Hi, my name is Courtney Quinn, here with Leafreport at the USA CBD Expo in Miami, and I'm here with Tony from your CBD store and SunMed. How are you, Tony?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, thank you. Can you tell us a little bit about your company and its history?
Yeah, so we're basically a storefront location that pops up in local communities, and they all sort of source our products. So we provide SunMed as the name of our brand that we sell to consumers, and we do it through storefronts because we think that that's sort of a better place to have a conversation about CBD, to learn about CBD. They don't have to purchase it right away. They can try samples, and then they can come back in and go about, figuring out what product's best for them. So that's sort of the model that we're running under. We're very different than the online space, I would say, right now. So that's sort of where we are right now. So, and we have
very cool.
We have 400 storefronts right now across the country in 38 different states.
Wow,
so,
that's impressive.
Yeah,
awesome.
Growing very fast.
Yeah. What can you tell us about your manufacturing process?
So what's interesting about me is I have my PhD in analytical chemistry. So when I first started, we had about 12 storefronts. And at that point, we really wanted to figure out how are we going to test this stuff, how are we going to make sure that it's safe, and then how are we going to make sure that we sort of push this industry in that direction too. So what we do is I have my own HPLC, which is done for potency, and it's how everybody tests for potency in this industry. And I actually have it in my own lab, and I run samples on our stuff during manufacturing. We also pool together all of our samples, send that off, and third-party lab test that with a full panel of tests, and then we do batch testing throughout that. So our testing is probably one of the most annoying conversations I have with my CEO is like, we need to keep doing these tests. Like, okay, whatever, it's a lot of money. I'm like, well, it's worth it. So at this point, I feel like we've kind of hit that point where we're setting a standard. Every single bottle has a QR code on it. It's tied to a batch number that anybody can pull up. You don't have to actually buy the product. It doesn't unlock. You can go check it out beforehand. So our transparency is what's driven us to success over about a year. We've grown this much. So that's really I think our manufacturing stronghold. We do all of the stuff ourselves. We don't white label anything. So anything that we do, we go talk to the manufacturer, show them what CBD is and how to do it in a product and execute it in the right way. So
very cool.
Yeah.
What's your story with the CBD industry? How did you get familiar with CBD?
So my background, like I said, is analytical chemistry, and what I did was started to do research in terpenes at first and plant-based materials, and then I discovered the CBD research that was emerging about 5 years ago, and from there I was dead set that this is going to help change natural medicine and help give a good face to a sort of natural solution that like opioids or other pain relievers or things like that were diminishing and starting to all the side effects that are associated with it. So at that point I sort of decided I'm going to try to put science into the CBD industry. So that's been my goal as a chemist, is to inject as much rhetoric, as much rigor, everything that we can about how do we understand how cannabinoids are working, and what is important when it comes to vetting a product, kind of thing.
That's great.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts you can share about the current legal status of CBD?
It's an interesting question. We work. I've actually taken meetings with a USDA in DC with their chief of staff and a couple other senators and people in Florida. We've helped write bills that were important to batching out things. So in Florida, we have a Senate Bill 1020 that actually requires QR code testing. We helped be a part of that conversation. I think at this point, the FDA and other people are going to begin to do regulations, so we want to help be ahead of that. We want to do more than that, because the more people, after they understand what CBD is, after about 5 or 6 months, they start to look into more and more questions. And it really comes down to transparency. So knowing what every single input is in there, where it comes from, what facility it went through, who handled it, what protocols were done during handling it. Those are all important questions that we need to answer as an industry. So I think if we just make sure that we're ahead of the legislation and don't just sort of like, well, it's not regulated, so we don't care about these questions that consumers care about, that's when companies are going to run into trouble, I think, legally. So hopefully we're well above that, but these things change all the time, legalities of CBD regulations, but we're able to adapt because of our manufacturing practices, I think. So Yeah.
Very nice. There are a lot of brands, demand, hype, and products, but there are no specific guidelines and regulations restricting the market. Could you give a brief overview of the emerging market from your point of view?
Yeah, I think it's similar to what I was just touching on a bit. I think the industry needs to do a lot of self-regulation, making sure that our intention, right, is to help people. And a lot of these people have compromised immune systems, so mold and yeast may be fine if you're manufacturing like some soda or adult beverage, for example, right? But at this point, we're dealing with such sensitive ecosystems and people that we need to really be careful about what's going into our product. So I think that's the critical piece here as an industry. If you can, manufacture with those practices, we should be moving forward pretty well as an industry together. I'm all about working together with other CBD companies too. So if there's ever a question of how to do this, what to test for, I'm always just trying to push CBD forward in that way. So,
oh, that's great.
Yeah.
What do you think a user should look for in a product?
Third-party lab reports, making sure they know what's in it. They should look for quality ingredients as well. If there's other ingredients in there, make sure that the manufacturer can answer what those are and why they're in there, what's the intention of them being in there. But I think CBD comes in a lot of different forms too. So there's topicals, there's oils, there's gummies, there's vapes. Each one of those has its own utility. So each one of those can be used for something that would work for one patient that wouldn't work for another. So I don't think it's as simple as there's one CBD product that's perfect for everybody, right? So if somebody has, a problem with their lungs, they wouldn't be able to vaporization maybe. If somebody has stomach problems, they wouldn't use a product that has sorbitol, which is an alcoholic sugar. There's all those questions that need to be answered, but I think what people need to stop doing is saying that this one CBD thing is the best CBD thing and that's it. I think it should be, there's a range of different forms of it. There's a range of how it interacts with your body, and that really is the answer. It's not that there's this one magic elixir that's the perfect CBD formulation. That's just not how this stuff works. I mean, it's been used for centuries, and nobody at this point everyone disagrees as to what is the most important cannabinoid at this point. So,
interesting. Do you use CBD yourself, and which products, if so?
I don't really use CBD as much as probably people would think that I would, but I do test them for like new product formulations. So if I'm ever making like a new product, I'll test it. But in general, around the office, we sometimes have stuff lying around from other companies too that are like, this certain strain, this certain whatever. So we do test it in that way. But I'm not like I'm a chemist, so I need to be as non-biased as possible. So I can't really just sit there and be obsessed with one product, because then I'll be like, well, that has to be the best one, So I need to have my view as clear as possible when I'm looking at this stuff.
More of a CBD tester.
Yes.
Great.
Exactly.
How do you see the future of the CBD industry?
I think it can go a lot of different ways. I liken it to where big tobacco was and where big alcohol was, right? So tobacco kind of did this thing where they like made up a bunch of scientific things, right? And nobody really knew about all the carcinogen dangers, right? They tried to hide that research. And then it was an emerging market. Now people kind of know what they're getting out of their cigarette, right? It's more at like a honest place, I think, cigarettes and tobacco. It could also go the way of alcohol, where it's just marketing and, it's all beer or whatever like that. But I think that this has a unique opportunity here to be something that's different. So there's something that actually helps people, is for people, can bring farmers to work, can bring communities back to life, can put minorities back to work in places that they haven't done. So there was a census in 2017 that said something about like 95% of farmers are Caucasian, and I think that there's a discrepancy there that's an issue. And I think that this industry has a chance to touch all of these things. It's so wide-reaching right now, and I think that's exciting, but scary in a lot of ways too, because it could fall in those other categories that I mentioned with like alcohol and tobacco. But I think enough people in here know somebody who's benefited from CBD or cannabis or whatever, and I think that's the part that's pushing people to this. And I think hopefully if we come from a helping standpoint, rather than a marketing, financial, legal standpoint. We can fix a lot of problems that we have in this country that were damaged by pharmaceuticals or, opioids or other things like that. So,
well, thank you very much for sharing with us, Tony.
Thank you.